a grid collapse. Season of darkness for a while at least. That was the unfortunate news yesterday. And it's really crushing because the point has been made that so very much has been invested in our power sector, energy sector, and there hasn't been really almost like anything, maybe I should say more politically correctly, there hasn't been much to show for it. But here we are. Just as the president is over, as you know, at the United Nations wooing investors, these are some of the things that investors have cited in the past as the reason for their lethargy. But the president has been saying that, look, new broom, new times, it's not business as usual. And then unfortunately, here we are. Even as the minister, the Minister of Power, the Minister of Power, Mr. Bayo Adelabu, was speaking at a conference saying that it wasn't really a big deal to sort of diagnose and understand what the problems were. Very, very shortly after that, there was an announcement of a system collapse. Okay, at this stage, we're very lucky to have with us a professor of energy and electricity law in Nigeria, in the person of Professor Yemioke. He is of the University of Lagos Law Department, as I said. A fine morning to you, Prof.
Good morning.
Most Nigerians, I would imagine, are frustrated. Now, I'm talking here about the end users, the ordinary, the small ones, but then the small businesses and the individuals who have, even before the collapse, many communities have been in darkness for months for whatever the failure was. And now we have this, shall we say, equalization, where everybody now is going to be treated the same, unfortunately. It's embarrassing, isn't it, that this is what, the second or third in about a week? And Prof, something seems to be fundamentally wrong, is my layman's guess. But that's why we have you. You have all the answers. You teach this subject matter. What is wrong, Prof?
Thank you very much. Well, it's true. I'm not only teaching. I teach, I research, I practice, and I profess energy and electricity law. As rightly said, all is not well. And I'll be honest with Nigerians in saying all is not well. And I try to be bare. I'll try to tone down my technical jargons to speak to Nigerians.
That would be appreciated.
So that we will understand basics, the elementary facts as to why we've had grid collapses and will continue or may continue
to have action.
Grid collapses unless and until certain crucial things are done.
Okay.
All I'm about to say now are things I've said, I've written about, they're all well documented. So I'm not saying anything new.
Okay.
Of course, we appreciate the fact that we have a new regime in place that is eager and willing to start to address those major concerns in the power sector and energy sector generally. What is called electricity started in Nigeria in 1861 in Ijora here. So it's nothing new.
Those were the days of ECN.
Few years after it started in the United Kingdom, we had electricity here around Ojora. The structure that we had subsequently was grid-based distribution. Grid-based distribution targeted urban centers. Similar to the days of telephones, that we will have telephone box in your house and they run the telephone cables for you to have access. But the technology of telephony and electricity distribution have been changing over time. Let's take it back to the petroleum sector. Similar scenario. We had crude oil refined. We have pipelines laid to certain areas for us to distribute. You have burst pipelines. Why? Because those pipelines are weak and dilapidated. So any attempt for you to pump petrol into those pipes or pipelines, it will burst and you have wastages.
In fact, as you were saying that, Prof, I was reminded of, I think, way back when Fashola was governor in Lagos State, he had spoken in that same connection in relation to water supply.
The same thing.
Lead pipes, ancient,
archaic. So the infrastructure that we have, the transmission infrastructure that we had years back, they're very weak. Any attempt to, I'm trying to tone down my technical languages now, any attempt to pump power that's generated into it, you hear, bwam.
Okay.
Because it's weak and cannot carry it.
Okay, that probably explains the explosion that was reported.
You always have that routinely because the grid infrastructure is dilapidated, is old and weak. So you now have new entities attempting to generate. We have like 15 to 20,000 hydro power that is generated. You can't evacuate. You can't put on the grid. Why? The capacity of the national grid is so weak and dilapidated. At any attempt to put new grid, it will burst. So, what are the options?
Sir, before you go forward, I was going to say, since men of knowledge, men of science, men, who excel in administration have been in charge here, it's not as if we don't know what we're doing. That's why I'm surprised at what you're saying, that I can't even conceptualize the idea that it would not have been known that we have to fix this infrastructure as we are increasing capacity. The Obasanjo monies that were spent that people are complaining about till today, what was that all about then?
Thank you. Attempt had been made for the overhaul of national grid. Attempt had been made recently for what is called grid expansion. Mm-hmm. That hasn't worked.
Hasn't worked?
It hasn't worked. I will tell you why it's not going to work. It's like we're going against tides. For instance now, some countries now, they're not so much bothered about new roads. Do you know why? It's a policy thing. They're trying to take cars off the roads.
Okay.
To incentivize water transportation, rail transportation. And some countries are spending a lot of money for bike trails. So that people can bike the whole of Lagos.
Yes.
In safety. You know that when you go to the UK, when you go to Canada, yes, you can, you bike. You enjoy biking. It's safe and you don't need to spend money buying fuel. That is expensive now. Some countries have devised deliberate policy measures to take cars off the road. By tolling, if you go on certain roads, you pay heavily. If you get to certain urban centers, you pay through your nose for parking. So you are forced to leave your cars and go via public transportation or rail.
And there are policies directing all of this.
Strategic policies
designed
so that there is no pressure on the roads. And government will now deploy the resources that will have been used to construct new roads to maintain trails, rail transportation, water transportation, and basic things, which is cheaper.
So when you bring all of that to our system here,
so the same.
So what's our policies, sir? Is it our policies that have been lacking, that we've not been able to have an appropriate overview of the entire setup? And then because we hear of so many consultants coming in.
See, I'm a practical person. Unfortunately, maybe the love practice side of me tends to say things the way they are. I write, I theorize, I go all those bombastic languages of law, big grammar, fine. But when it comes to real national challenges, I look at you, I bought to heaven and tell you, Egbon, this is it, it will not work, you do it. That's what I do. But in this power sector, let me tell you, for as long as we keep spending money on the dilapidated grid infrastructure, it's not going to work. The world is going off grid. Okay, let me give you certain examples. I was harsh against the federal government when they brought Manitoba Hydro.
Okay.
I did not only speak against that. Of course, there is another side of me that was sympathetic to anything from Canada anyway. What I wanted to do was to react so that they will hear me in Canada and Nigeria. So I wrote an article, and I opted to publish it in the University of Manitoba Law Journal deliberately to capture the Manitoba and Canadian audience and in Nigeria. So I wrote. I told them why Manitoba Hydro would not work. Manitoba Hydro had a contract for transmission. They had transition management contract with the Nigerian government, and I saw a lot of dirty things. And it wasn't transparent, and I asked relevant questions. And I said, Manitoba, you're going to mess yourself up in Nigeria, contrary to the Canadian culture, corporate culture, because of ABC. The Nigerian government, this is it. And I painted a picture. A few months after I published my article, Manitoba Hydro contract became messed up. And people started calling, even intelligence people called me thinking, oh, did you have access to certain privileged information? I say, you don't need a soothsayer to tell you this.
If you know what to look for, if you know what you're looking at.
So Manitoba Hydro had a contract to manage this same transmission. It failed. And of course, I know why it failed. I told them it was going to fail. It failed. They brought Siemens.
Mm-hmm. Siemens especially.
Buhari
was quite active in that.
I wrote against Siemens also, even in my new electricity law book, when I revised it recently. I said, Siemens will not be, it's not going to bring about the magic one in the power sector because of A, B, C, D, E, F. Today, we are struggling. The world, we're going against global tides. The world is going extensively off-grid. The concept of a federated grid wouldn't make sense to me in the 21st century.
Okay, that's a bit more. That's a bit of what I want to learn from you about.
Okay.
So what do you mean when you say the world is going off-grid? Because visually, we can just imagine a grid of wires servicing all over the place. But you say that whole national grid thing is like old hat now.
It's not realistic. You know why we had a national grid? And Nigerian government struggled with it. Political reasons. Because if you have disaggregated grid, meaning Lagos will have 24-hour access to power, and there's no power in for instance in Bayelsa, or for instance in Gombe, in Yobe State. So whatever we've generated will mop it up,
put it out,
and we'll have to do federal
character to it. So let everybody suffer the same.
What I call federal bad character. It was meant to be something positive. Because, for goodness sake, it's in Oshogbo here that we have the transmission infrastructure. Whatever power you generate from Lagos goes there. Whatever you generate from Kaduna goes there. You now start to distribute back. And we have transmission losses. So if you are generating 4,000 into the national asset, pulled together, by the time you start distributing, you have transmission losses unaccounted for. There's so many. And it was because of the so-called conceived political exigencies of allowing Nigerian and Nigerian state to develop at the same pace. It's not going to work. So it was a kind of a deliberate policy to have a centralized federated grid infrastructure so that they can give to other.
I can begin to get an inkling.
So the government was unwilling
to do the right thing
for several years and decades to let go of the national grid until recent constitutional amendment and the signing into law of the Electricity Act 2023 that frees off the national grid to the extent that we cannot have state-based grid. I even argue that we could have concession grid. We could have regional grid. Nobody wanted to hear the regional grid, because that might be an Odua agenda. That by the time you have your own Odua grid, then there will be crisis or something. They have their own whatever. So we have to be careful. Even the so-called disaggregated grid was being seen as an agenda for certain things. No, we can't have a federated grid in the 21st century. It's not sustainable.
I see.
It's not sustainable. So we need to balkanize the grid. There's no point generating electricity in Lagos and taking it to the transmission lines to be distributed to other areas. Because even what is generated in Lagos is not even sufficient for Lagos.
So the policy, since from the little that you've said now, one can begin to understand that the policy wasn't really aimed at a scientific efficiency.
It can never be.
It wasn't that way. So it's like the authorities knew that this is not necessarily the most efficient process, but however, it is what is most satisfactory in a political sense.
When in the 90s we started witnessing challenges, instead of now devising off-grid infrastructure, government had repeatedly been embarking upon grid maintenance and expansion. And largely, the reason why we seem to have spent, perhaps we have spent more in a supposedly privatized power sector in Nigeria, is because federal government is holding on to the TCN,
Transmission
company of Nigeria, the transmission aspect of the chain. Federal government is in charge of that one, and they've been spending a lot of money, and the money is going down the drain.
I was going to ask, to what effect?
Because we don't now need to go via the grid. There are a lot. We need to start deploying mini grid, which was what we ought to have done. We look at a settlement. It's okay. Population 2,000. Let's give them 1,000 megawatts. Oh, can you do it private sector? Let's work out the mathematics, the tariff mathematics and methodology. Okay, it's self-sustaining. In 20 years, they will recoup their money with interest. The community will be fine. Everything will be fine. Business will start to come because power will be stable there. Look at community here. Oh, so that's why you have some settlements now, some estates, private estates now going for their home IPPs. And that's why now
independent power producers.
Yes, we now have embedded generation, meaning you can generate to target a particular location. So a lot of effort should be directed to off-grid generation and transmission and distribution, including captive. Captive is when established manufacturing concerns and industries like TVCs and others can generate power for their own use. And if this company now is generating 2 megawatts and their maximum use is 1 megawatt, what happens to the extra 1 megawatt? They look at the estate in the neighborhood and have a deal, power purchase agreement, and sell to them and make money, and they are fine. Those had been difficult until recently. As a matter of national policy of a federated grid. So when you generate, then you are forced now to sell it to the national grid to be distributed nationally. That would not be realistic.
Meanwhile, the problem of the dilapidated pipeline network
is
still there.
Even when we had independent power plants staggered all over the country, to wheel the power to the transmission power line became a major challenge. So countries are doing mini grids. Countries are doing off-grid. Countries are doing mobile grid. I'm sure you know of mobile power stations.
Yes, yes.
Just like mobile generators. You move it down, put it there, generate, connect the communities, and they're fine.
So this is the truth about, I mean, if it was a straightforward, academic, scientifically correct exercise, then this is what we'd be having. But you've explained how there are political considerations as well. And this, because when I hear knowledgeable people say that actually I've diagnosed this matter and it shouldn't be that much of a problem, well, it might well be that they weren't taking all the different aspects of it into consideration in coming up with the idea that I've diagnosed. Are you diagnosing on this dilapidated national grid?
And it's even much more expensive. It's old technology. It's like saying, oh, you want to go back via the option of cabled telecommunication lines. Who does that? Your phone is not connected to any cable.
Because science has
Science is taking up. So why are we not seeing that in the power sector? We have it.
Coupled with, Prof, I hear that the reluctance of, they say that only about 40% of Nigerian electricity consumers are actually metered. They're complaining that we were not appropriately metered. People are reluctant to pay, it is said, simply because they see the inefficiencies. And NEPA resorted, well, not NEPA, but you know what I mean. They resorted at one time to an estimated billing, and that never was fair. So, quite frankly, it looks like, in the light of what you said in the last 20 minutes or so, I don't know the extent to which we've begun to actually address this power crisis situation we have.
Is a long haul, really. Even the concern of the metering challenge that you pointed out. It was in this studio I talked about the politics of metering. It was in this studio, I think this studio, yes, studio. And what brought about politics of metering? I said the discourse, not all, maybe all, maybe some, may, in quote, be unwilling to meter everybody. And the logic is simple. Once you are metered, you can control your level of consumption. You may decide to put yourself in darkness for 22 hours.
Yes.
And switch on your meter for 2 hours.
But that's fair, isn't it?
To TV.
That's fair, isn't it?
They need to make money. So they are conflicted in that regard.
Yes.
So they stemmed down the metering process. Then there were policies somersault on metering. There was the regime called CAPME, which was a kind of credit scheme to enable you buy meters. When they were not making meters available, the federal government then brought out a policy that will enable Nigerians to now pay for their meters. Because meters are supposed to be assets of the discos. They will buy their meters, like credit-based. So each time you recharge your meters, you get credited for part of the money spent to procure the meters until the cost of purchase of meter is defrayed. That didn't work. They now brought out another policy called MAP, Meter Asset Provider, to extricate the discos totally from metering. They now concession metering to separate entities, companies who will now be in charge of metering. And guess what? It's a whole mess. A whole lot of mess going in there. Discos that were not supposed to have anything to do with those MAP indirectly now are involved. And they place their demand at so many times. When federal government rolled out these metering schemes, rolled out free meters. Another avenue for fraud. I'm not sure anybody is auditing the free meter scheme or the federal government that got billions of naira.
So where does all of this now bring us in the light of our trying to invite foreign direct investment? And one of the reasons I hear that they were a bit reticent before was the fact that we don't have all that is needed for anybody to invest effectively in your country.
Foreign direct investment in the power sector could be challenging. And before I go into that, you know, we have a crisis at hand. A medical doctor friend told me a nasty experience that should not even be said on here. In a rural hospital where they had no generator, even if they had, they can't afford to buy fuel to power the gen. They had no light, and they had to perform a surgery. Do you know what they did? The chargeable lantern and phones was what they used to light up the theater to perform surgical operations.
As bad as that.
As bad as that in these countries. Let me tell you, do you know a number of eateries, small-scale businesses that have folded up completely, where we normally buy meat pies and donuts. Where are they? Because nobody can sustain that kind or those kind of businesses on diesel and petrol. So we have a major crisis at hand. How do we get out of this? We need massive investment in the power sector. How can we get that? Whoever is going to invest in your country will look at certain facts. Technically, we call it bankability study. Bankability studies means we look at the whole scenarios of so many factors are involved anyway. Look at whether investing in your company, in your country, or in your state makes commercial sense. Whether if I'm putting down my X plus Y amount of dollars, I can recoup that money plus yield over time. So if it makes business sense to invest in your community or in your state or in your country, investors will come. If investors are not likely going to recoup their investment with yield, they are not going to come. Sadly, in the last 10 years, we haven't had major investment in the power sector. We haven't had major foreign direct investment in the power sector. Why are they not coming? Because those who are on ground, existing players, are not really solvent. So there's no incentive for people to come on board.
And that's why when I think the last great thrust in this direction was the Siemens thing in the President Buhari era. One thought that, because it was said at that time that Siemens is going to come and it's going to clear up a lot of things, a lot of corruption, a lot of technical ability is going to be put onto the system. But you just said that you were watching all of that and you were doubtful that it was going to happen.
I was on here. Fortunately, I had another fellow on the other side in another studio, Rewani. Bismarck Rewani was quite optimistic about Siemens. And I was brutally pessimistic about it. And of course, we are all experts in our respective fields. At the end of the day, he had his say, I had mine. But then I'm vindicated.
Yeah, because
by now, if Siemens had been the magic one to bring about sustainability of the power sector, we should be seeing signs now.
So is it a matter of, when you say some people seem to have a pessimistic outlook, other people an optimistic outlook, is it, oftentimes you say we have to be patient. This thing will take time. A mass with an inertia needs time to get moving, and once it gets moving, then economies begin to accrue to it. Those kind of things we were told in the past, but you said, look, that doesn't bear scientific analysis.
Nigeria is now a country in a hurry for growth and development. We're in a hurry for development now.
Okay.
We don't have time anymore.
In order to digest all this that you've put on the table, Prof, which is plenty, let's take a quick break and then come back, because we can't stay here. We've got to get up out of this hole, and what are the options?
Sure.
Stay with us, please. We'll be right back.
The TVC News at 7 and the TVC News at 10 are not like any other news broadcast.
It's the big news hour.
Experience information and entertainment like never before as TVC Breakfast takes your weekends to a whole new level. Introducing TVC Breakfast Weekend Edition, your ultimate source of thrilling sports updates, insightful political analysis, and captivating entertainment news. Stay in the know with what's trending, catch up with the latest in sports, and immerse yourself in the latest buzz from the world of music and movies. Your weekends are no longer just days off, but moments packed with knowledge, excitement, and enjoyment. TVC Breakfast Weekend Edition, only on TVC News.
Okay, welcome back. As all Nigerians are aware, there was a crash from a reported peak of 3,594.6, let's just say 3,560 megawatts, I beg your pardon, to 42.7 megawatts. 42.7. Just work out that percentage. There was this collapse. It wasn't, this one that we've just experienced was about the second or third in about 5 days. So that's a problem. Our expert this morning is Professor Yemi Oke. He's Professor of Energy and Electricity Law at the University of Lagos. And we're looking at really going back to the beginning. He went back to the beginning, if you've been with us from the top of the program, to taking it over from the colonialists at the time to where we are now. And the implication has been put on that. Some of the infrastructure back then is still in use now. Now, you don't need to be an expert to know that, oh, is that as bad? But let me now ask Prof. Lagos State, because you told us about, how inefficient it is to be sending everything to a central location and then redistributing it. Lagos State, back in the day when Tinubu was governor, there was an Enron, an entity called Enron. It was thought that, well, everybody sort yourself out. Lagos was thinking of how to sort itself out. Enron was going to be the way. A lot of progress was made. It was reported. Obasanjo was president at the time. And here I might be wrong. Let me just say it the way I know how to say it. Obasanjo killed it. That's the Bushman way that I know. Obasanjo killed it for whatever reason. And it probably is related to what you were talking about, this whole federated thing, and let everybody develop at a pace. Let it not be seen that somebody has gone so far ahead, like you're looking like another country, and then another part. So slow down all these new gringos. Slow them down. Let the other people catch up. That's the Bushman way, I know. But Prof, what happened then, and why have we not been able to continue along that trajectory?
That's a very important question. And I tried to also put it on the table. One, Lagos had what I call experimented state-based power generation, transmission, and distribution.
Okay.
Around 1999 to 2000 through Lagos Enron project. Mm-hmm. Fortunately, I was a very young lawyer then working with your law firm that was advising Lagos State. I worked with them, and the Attorney General then was the immediate past vice president. We were coming to the office, we had a series of meetings. Enron was to work. Enron was killed by federal might of the then president Olusegun Obasanjo. So whether you are right,
but why?
Whether you are right or wrong,
okay,
I don't
maybe
know.
You don't want to go into the
but
why.
I was involved as a young person,
and
I
it was killed.
And I know it was not allowed to work.
I understand.
Let me put it that way. Was not allowed to work by federal might. Certain issues. But
at that juncture, sir, since you've answered that my Bushman question in a more refined way, let me bring in Ada, who has called in, so that she doesn't hold on interminably. Good morning, Ada.
Hello, good morning, Mr. Yori. Good morning, Professor Yemi Oke. It's Ada calling from Jos State. Your guest has said it all. Until we move away from this idea of depending on one national grid, we will never get it right power-wise. The power sector should be decentralized. I understand it has been decentralized by Buhari's administration, but it's still on paper. Mm-hmm. So each state will be permitted to generate its own electricity. They will now explore other sources of generating power, such as solar, coal, nuclear, biomass, wind, hydro, and what have you. We need to have policies that will attract investors. Moreover, we should expand and take advantage of what we have locally in rural areas to generate power. Solar panels can be subsidized to enable many people afford it. Without missing words, constant power is a thing for economic development. No matter how our president travels around to go and weigh investors, as he is there and they hear that this grid has collapsed how many times in 5 days, what does that tell of us? Mm-hmm. So we have to do something about it. All the same, let's not give on Nigeria.
Thank you very much, Ada, for calling in. And something Ada said in there about solar panels, it just reminded me that in the U.S., the government is actually subsidizing the acquisition of solar panels where people don't have to pay out of pocket almost for solar panels.
Yeah.
But, sir, let me not distract you from the line that you were on.
Yes, two ways now.
Yes.
Two ways. I'm going to conclude on the first question.
Sure.
I'm going to go into solar panel and rural electrification that Ada mentioned. Very important, because those are very important points. So I was saying that with the experimented Lagos Enron project under the then Governor Bola Ahmed Tinubu, 1999 to 2000, that was frustrated by the federal government of President Olusegun Obasanjo. Nature, destiny now put the same man who experimented state-based generation, transmission, and distribution in charge as the president. And the feelers are that more than any other thing, Nigerians will judge the current administration of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu critically based on power and economy, majorly. Why? Because if you had tried to do something that somebody frustrated you, now you have the yam.
Yes.
You have the knife.
Oh, yeah. Let's see you.
What you are not allowed to do in Lagos then,
Now there are no
call
impediments.
all your eggheads, put them in a room. They won't leave that room until they solve the problem of the power sector for Nigeria. So Nigerians are going to be very critical in assessing President Bola Ahmed Tinubu based on achievement in the power sector. And the country is in a hurry for development because it's affecting all of us. We are still talking about 33,000, 4,000 megawatts in a country of 220 million. Insignificant, and the insignificant megawatt that we have is collapsing on all of us. So that's that.
Okay.
Then coming to
again, sir, just please hold that place, because you know it concerns everybody, and people are calling in from all over. Mr. Joshua in Irewolede has called in. Good morning to you, sir. Try and be brief, if you will.
Thank you, sir, and good morning to your to the prop there.
Yeah. Thank you.
Uncle Yori, this particular matter upsets me so much, because since I was a toddler, we have been talking about NEPA, no light, no light, no light. I want to plead to the president, Uncle Yori, if we can have a consensus as Nigerians to solve one problem within the next, let me say, 4 years, let's just give it to him, because an intelligent man. Please, they don't have problem of power in Aso Rock. We have problem of power in Nigeria. If they can solve that problem, it will help Nigerians. From the point of solar, let's say this local consumption, Uncle Yori, local consumption, my own home, I don't need this, their national grid. I don't need any grammar. Just subsidize solar.
Yes.
Let us be able to light up our homes for basic work.
And take that out of their headache.
Another side for industrial power, which can be solved. So all these, what the prof has said, which is the problem of Nigeria, is that regional power, everybody is suspicious. If I generate my own, you want to break away. We can use science to solve that problem. Let us have a scheme that everybody will be forced to subscribe to, whether you are Igbo, Yoruba, or Hausa, anyone. Let us solve this problem, Uncle Yori, I beg you.
I hear you, sir. Thank you very much for calling in, Mr. Joshua. Grab hold of one problem is what Joshua is saying. Grab hold of one problem and just sort that one out, excel on, and then let somebody else carry on from there.
Let me just address Joshua and Nada together.
Okay.
They're saying the same thing.
Okay.
And I'll try to be brief.
And then try and come back to the solar matter.
That's the issue I want to address. The issue is this. I was slightly disappointed when I saw the new Electricity Act. Though the Electric Power Sector Reform Act of 2005 that I criticized severally, wrote against and pointed out well over 200 or more errors in it, it addressed not all my major concerns.
Okay.
I'm still not happy because we still retain Rural Electrification Agency and Rural Electrification Fund for power purposes. I said it's wrong. What is the business of the federal government with an agency called Rural Electrification Agency as a federated entity? Meaning federal government will still be concerned with generation of electricity in the rural communities that should have been ceded off to state government through the local government. And the fund, the Rural Electrification Fund, should be ceded to state so that they can take charge of this the electricity at the level of wards, units, and local government.
Okay.
Solar. There was a 1-7-star hotel in South Africa is 100% based on solar. Has nothing to do with national grid, and the hotel is doing well. And Nigerians are embracing solar. In as much as I would not want direct subsidy in energy, because I felt we don't want to go via the issue of the trend of subsidizing for energy. That energy is over subsidized. We were subsidizing petrol before. Nigeria has been subsidizing electricity. I'm sure you know.
Yes.
That's not
of course.
pronounced. So I'm not sure. We can't continue subsidizing everything. Government should incentivize solar manufacturing and production in Nigeria and deploy it massively. Power is something that you can generate from virtually everything and anything. I've said it here.
Wherever you are.
Region, there are certain areas in Nigeria that is good for windmills. You deploy it. Some solar farms, some mini hydros, gas. Power could be generated from several options. And I always cite the example of the state in Munich, where the state was in need of energy. They were facing energy crisis, and they wanted to face renewables. So they started collecting waste from homes and offices. It got to a level they were insufficient in that. They started reducing the cost of waste collection. For instance, you are collecting waste at 5 naira, they reduced to 3 naira. That was still not sufficient. They were collecting waste for free, for power. That was still not sufficient. They were paying people to generate enough waste so that they have something to collect to power. We should be proactive, and we need to decentralize our options.
Sir, apart from you're looking at the bigger problem, the whole problem, but how about the individual? Joshua from Irewale, they just called in. I can guess that what he's talking about is that, well, on my roof, me and my family, we're fine. Now, how do we get many more people to do that? And I alluded to the US example, if it is correct, that the government is actually, if you know how to apply for it, virtually underwriting the acquisition, private acquisition of solar panels. So go ahead and generate your own, get your inverters and all of that. And, so that headache is taken out of it. Is there any promise in that area? Because I noticed that you look at social media, a lot of people are now interested in generating their own, for the moment, 1 to 2 to 5,
units.
Yes.
So that's the trend. What I think the government would need to do in that regard is to incentivize solar panel manufacturing in Nigeria so that it becomes available at cheaper rates. Then government can now encourage manufacturers to go via embedded or captive generation, meaning manufacturing giants. Of course, they've been doing it before, but they were discouraged because once they generate in excess of their needs, they will have to sell to TCN.
Yes.
So that was the challenge, and they will not be able to distribute because the discos will have to take them to court because of the franchising thing. A whole lot of mess in the power sector that we need to clear.
One moment again, sir. Okay. Chukuma in Agbo, I understand you're a first-time caller. Thank you for calling. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, sir. Thank you for calling in.
I'm not a first-time caller, though it's long
I'm sorry for the bad information I was given. Please go ahead.
What I'm trying to say is this. If I'm not mistaken, I think the National Assembly have passed a law that decentralize the power system, that state governors can have their own generation power system.
Okay.
So what I'm trying to say, if they have passed that law, there's no need of saying you are going to subsidize solar again, because they are giving people opportunity to have their own light.
Okay.
So that it should be more competitive and it will be cheaper. If state governors can have their own in their state, compete with the national grid, I think they will have constant light. People will want to switch to where it is good, just like MTN, Glo, and Airtel. Wherever that fits you, you enter there. Remember when we first to the MTN, the price of call is so high. But now, they even give you card free in most time when you buy a light. The light that we bought that time, 26,000, 25,000.
25.
So that's what I'm trying to say. The next state governors begin to have their own generation system. Whether solar, whether wind, whichever way they want it. Let them start it.
Okay. Indeed. Thank you very much for calling in, Chukuma. Again, sorry about thinking of you as a first-time caller. You're actually a veteran caller. Now, that point that he made, the laws, do they indeed free us all up in that way?
Yes, to a large extent on papers. The law says states can now make laws to generate, transmit, and distribute electricity in their respective states. But if state A will need to distribute excess to state B, the federal government will come in through the NERC. That's fine. The challenge is this. I sat down to calculate, assuming Ogun State government will generate like 37 megawatts based on the next 10 years because of the trend of development there. They will need some humongous billions of dollars. Assuming the entire budget of Ogun State for the next 15 years is devoted to power alone, it will take them 21 years to generate that. Meaning there's no money for anything, they are not paying salaries, they just keep putting the money there. So it's not realistic for state government to fund. Government cannot fund the power sector. They should ensure the enabling environment for private investors to come on board. That is a challenge. No private investor will come to state A or state B or state C. I always say this, because the governor is handsome or because the commissioner in charge is beautiful. They're going to ask basic questions. How transparent is your environment? What are your laws? Is it a state that complies with its statutory or contractual obligations? If you have this agreement, is it a state that will comply and not start to change the goalposts when vital goals were about to be scored? There are a lot of questions. So investors are very critical. They are not subjective. They are realistic. If they are not going to make money investing in your state, they are not going to come. And the challenge is that with the decentralized option now, that is not a matter of the Constitution and statute. Constitutional amendment are now Electricity Act of 2023. States are institutionally challenged. Because federal government could look elsewhere and say, oh, be it on grid, state can generate, transmit, and distribute. Be it off grid, the law now says state can generate, transmit, and distribute. So don't come to me, go to your states.
Yeah.
And the states are not empowered to do that yet. I've not seen any, maybe Lagos, perhaps Rivers, taking steps in that direction. States by now should be out, attracting small-scale mini-grid investors.
That's yet another option. Rotimi in the UK. Good morning to you, sir.
Good morning, Uncle Yori. How are you today?
Very well, thank you. Thank you for calling.
Right. Just a quick one, Uncle Yori. Good morning,
Professor. Okay.
Good morning, Professor. Just a quick one, Professor. Do we not think that the power generation in Nigeria should not just be decentralized as the last administration has suggested, has enacted, but the fact that the same organization will generate power, distribute power, market power? Is that not too much of a task? Should that as well not be decentralized? Let the generation be done by different entities, marketing done by different entities, and then distribution done by different entities, as it is in most of the Western world that we live in.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Don't you think?
Thank you very much, Rotimi, for that question. Thank you very much, Rotimi.
See, even what Rotimi said is quite germane and important. In some region or state in the US and Canada, you have like 3 or 4 generators, companies generating and distributing. Like you have Disco in Lagos and Ikeja. You could have like 10. It becomes the issue of, oh, who has mega to sell to me? I buy from the person. No sentiments. And there is competition. Healthy ones. So we might get there if you put certain measures or structures in place. What he's saying is that different entities should be in charge of generation, transmission, distribution, marketing. That's what we have in Nigeria. I went as far as indicating what I call M for M initiative, meaning these challenges of metering that we've been having should be seeded off to meter manufacturers in Nigeria. Everything and anything about metering should be for meter manufacturers, just as you just buy a line. You go and buy your phone whatever you want. That's it. You buy the brand of phone you want. If you like, buy expensive phone, you buy small touchlight phone, or whatever. So the same thing. If you like, buy meters of 20 million naira, 10 million naira, sophisticated meter that can remotely charge or whatever. You patronize your meter manufacturer for the brand of meter that you want, and they will now need to calibrate with the particular disco that will supply. This thing is not rocket science.
Well, exactly.
So the meter manufacturer should be instead of now, they should be encouraged, giving concessions like other players in the cement and other sectors, so that they can manufacture and make meters available to Nigerians. We should go wide extreme ends of bringing down the power sector to the doors of Nigerians. And the manufacturers should be encouraged also to generate. If they invest in generation, it's good business for them because they can sell excess of what is generated to their neighbors. And the whole notion of franchise areas or things will get done away with. The country should be in a hurry for development. Nigeria is actually in a hurry for development. And we need to be critical, take critical steps.
Thank you so much, Professor Yemi Oke, because in the past almost an hour or so, I guess there are a lot of people who now know a bit more about the nature of the challenge before us and the intricacies and all the different things. It's not, you might think of power and the energy generation as science, and it is science, but this is science also infused
and wizard for it.
Infused with politics, infused with our own environment. Nevertheless, thank you very much, Prof, for coming along and enlightening us about this. I know there's a heck of a lot more. Otherwise, you wouldn't be a teacher in a university on this same subject. Look how long it takes for you to become proficient in it. So thank you very much, Prof, for coming along. And we look forward. You said it, we need to be in a hurry. And if we're in a hurry, then that is going to have to be reflected in the policies that we are developing and allowing. Okay, so that's our program today. Thank you very much once again, Professor Yemi Oke of the University of Lagos. That's our program today. Please join us tomorrow for a fresh edition. I am Yori Folarin. Bye-bye for now.
It's the Premier League all on DSTV. All the goals, all the clashes, all the moments. All of Rashford, Salah, and Saka. This start is all in the language of your choice. All in HD. Available on all these bouquets to choose from. To watch on all these devices. Stay connected for all the action. Get DSTV with an HD decoder. Plus dish plus 1 month confirmed for 18,500 naira. It's the Premier League. All on DSTV.
The following is a paid presentation by ShopX TV. Do you spend the night trying